Okay, most of you know who I am, Danny Stimson. I am a CDM coordinator, but come April next year, I won't be because the regs are changing. So this presentation is pretty much my professional obituary. They've made me do it myself, which is good, isn't it? So CDM 2015. Before we start, just quick raise of hands. I mean, I know most of you contractors, put your hands up. Want to admit to being contractors, designers, clients, none. Oh, good. Right, that's fine because all you contractors are going to have to tell the clients their new duties for next April. Right, here we go. Introduction. Okay. First of all, we're going to have a little look back at 1994 and 2007, just to put the changes into context. We'll have a brief overview of what the changes are likely to look like for 2015. But just bear in mind, the regs haven't actually been finalised yet, so this is, in some respect, my interpretation of what's been put out so far. That might look a little different come next April. There's a fair chance next April won't actually come and it will be put back to October, because that's what they tend to do. Right, we'll look at what clients need to know. There's some big changes for clients. What designers need to know, because there's some big changes for designers. We'll look at the CDMC role in 2015 and how that will look. And we'll look at what the principal contractor will need to know. Okay, and then we'll just have a quick summary. Okay, looking back to 1994 and 2007. In 1994, the first CDM regs came out. They were 24 regulations, and they were generally a reaction to the high fatality rate in construction during the 80s. Back in 1990, I think the death rate was 154 deaths in construction, which is reasonably high. During the mid-80s, it got over 350. So there was a real need to put some sort of regulation in place to try and reduce the amount of deaths on construction and put health and safety at the forefront of how designs are driven and how contractors manage risk on site. It was seen to be, well, it wasn't well received, that's for sure, and it was seen to be quite bureaucratic, overbearing, and complicated. So by the time 2007 came, there was a kind of an understanding on how the regs needed to change to make them more manageable and the process easier to understand. Okay, so in 2007, the CDM regs that we currently are governed by came into force. If the observant ones there, they wanted to make them less complicated, so they changed it from 24 regs to 48 regs. That makes it a lot less complicated, doesn't it? But generally the process became simplified. It became a lot easier to understand who the duty holders were, and they put a lot more duties on the client. And the role of the CDMC, previously it was called the planning supervisor, which confused everybody because everybody thought we were to do with planning applications and getting your building through the local authorities. So they changed the role to call it CDM coordinator. And the duties put onto the clients was basically, there was an understanding from the authorities that the people who controlled the financial aspect of construction would be in a better place to drive and have the right philosophy for reducing risk and hazards on site, because they're the one that hold the purse strings. Likewise, if they didn't want to, they could cut corners and increase risk and hazard on site. Stats for 2013, from 2012, 39 deaths in construction. So you can see, for me personally, I believe there's been a real correlation between the introduction of CDM and the change in society's philosophy with regard to health and safety on construction sites, and the role of CDM has actually had, I think, a significant impact on reducing the amount of fatalities on construction sites. I mean, the stats are there to be seen. For me, it'll be interesting in 20 years' time to see with CDM 2015 whether there's a rise of deaths in construction or whether it continues to go on a downward trend. Only time will tell on that one. Obviously, CDM, if used correctly, I believe, people that have been to my presentations before, This is 10, so if you've been to all 10, well done, you should get a t-shirt or something. And listen to me dribble on about CDM and the process and using it correctly and implementing CDM as a management tool. It is very, very effective, and it still will be effective if it's used correctly. It's just now going to be held by a new duty holder, not me. If you don't use it correctly, it's a waste of time and just a paperwork exercise like anything in life is. Okay, 2015 in brief. Again, I will reiterate, this is my interpretation of what has been put out so far. It's not actually put in stone yet for what the regs are actually going to be. Okay, the first driver for the change in the regs was to implement a copy in of the regulations from the, if anybody knows what the ECTMCS directive is from 1992, that's the European Directive for Transient and Movable Construction Sites, 1992 regulations. So, might sound like a backward step, but we're actually bringing in regulations that have been enforced since 1992. Into 2015 and take away regulations that have been enforced since 1994. It seems a bit bizarre, but the main drivers for the European directive is to, as we will see in a minute, put increased duties on domestic clients so that to remove the confusion that's been in the industry with regard to domestic clients, and welfare facilities. There's clear directives in the European directive from 1992 about what welfare should be on a construction site. There will be no formal CDMC role. That's what I do, so this is my obituary. As I said before, my role, my duty holder position under the regulations will be removed. The role will be split between the client and I've put the acronym PD, which is going to be Principal Designer. We're all familiar with the PC, which is Principal Contractor, which a lot of you guys actually will be undertaking those duties, but now we will have Principal Designer. And in short, the Principal Designer will take the burden of the majority of the duties that were currently undertaken by the CDM coordinator. There are changes in the notification criteria. The real opportunity here to get rid of 500 person days. I mean, how many people here know how long 500 person days is? Exactly, no one does, do they? Because it depends on how many people you've got on site, doesn't it? So try doing in your head 29 days with 17 people. How many person days is that, quickly? No? It's 493 person days. Well done, David. Yeah, you got a calculator out straight away, didn't you? Yeah. So nobody knows what 500 person days is anyway, so they had an opportunity to get rid of that bit of confusion. They have brought in something which I think is a lot more understandable, which is part of the European directive, which is the 20-person rule. The 20-person rule means you can't flood a site with 20 people in one go to get the job done quickly so that you don't have to comply with the current criteria of 30 days or less than 30 days of continuous work, which is the current threshold for F10 notification. So if you're going to have 20 guys on site, you have to notify it. The ACOP, the Approved Codes of Practice, which is CDMC's Bible for how we interpret the regulations and how we advise clients and contractors on how the regulations should be applied. The ACOP is being removed. I think this is a mistake personally, because I think if you ask any CDM coordinator, the ACOP is a very good tool. There are some useless bits of information in there. There's some anecdotal evidence on certain situations which are completely useless, but the majority of the information in there is actually very, very helpful to show clients and show contractors how they are meant to comply with the regulations. The view is the ACOP will be removed and it will be replaced by guidance. Guidance, as we all know, is not law, it's just guidance. So you can, take it on board or not, it's entirely up to you. It will be done under good practice and best practice. How are we doing time-wise? Not too bad. Right. And basically, the key driver was the Loffenstadt review in 2011 to cut out bureaucracy in health and safety in society in general, and CDM regs were highlighted by, I think it's the RIBA, as being a significant increase of cost in construction. So the main driver was to save money. So you remove the duty holder as a CDMC and you put the duties onto somebody else, and that for some reason is going to save money. So, in brief, what clients need to know. So for you guys, this is the bit that you're going to need to listen to closely, because as construction professionals, this is the bit that you are going to need to advise your clients of where their duties have changed, whether it be domestic or industry clients. There is, I think, a perception in the not necessarily the HSE, but in government, that all business-related clients understand the construction industry. But that's, from my point of view, plainly not true, because I have enough clients who are building factories for their new business that know nothing about construction, but they are deemed to be business clients because they make money out of construction, or they're building their building. So they would have to comply to the regs under 2007 anyway. Now we're bringing in domestic clients into it as well, which is a good thing, I think. But for them to hold the duties which they don't know they had in the first place is quite difficult to apply, I think, unless construction professionals like yourselves advise them what their duties are. Okay, so if you were a client in this audience, you hold new duties. Okay, domestic projects will be notifiable if they meet the criteria. So a lot of people thought domestic construction, if you were having a house built for yourself to live in, if you were Mrs. Miggins and doing an extension for your house, that CDM didn't apply. That was plainly wrong under all the regulations from 1994 to 2007 regulations, and it is definitely going to be covered under the 2015 regulations. So if you are now a domestic client, there is no ambiguity. CDM applies, but it always did anyway. It's just you didn't have any duties. So you're going to have to notify the HSE of domestic projects now. So that's the biggest change. There will be possibly a first appointment rule. So if you are wanting to have a house built and you appoint your designer, he will be the principal designer. Your contractor that you ask to build the house, he will be your principal contractor. He will be called a contractor if he's the only contractor on the project, and he will be called a principal contractor if there are more than one contractor on the project. But the first one appointed will take that duty, unless there is contracts to identify who the principal contractor will be. Interestingly, if you don't appoint, you will hold the duties as a client. So if you're not formally appointed as a contractor by your client, the client will hold the duties. How that works in reverse, that if you are a construction industry professional and you don't advise your client that they have duties and they need to appoint you formally, and they don't appoint you, that will have to be tested in court, won't it? Okay, if there is more than one contractor, the first appointed, as I said, is principal contractor. First appointed designer is principal designer. All other duties for clients will remain the same. There have been some changes to some nuances in the wording. Under the old regs, it was things like shall ensure that pre-construction information is provided to all designers and contractors. Now it's must. So there's a few elements where there was a little bit of ambiguity of whether you can or whether you can't. A lot of those words have been taken out, and must do it. So it's absolutely clear you must do it. Principal designers. So this is the biggest change in the regs is the principal designer role. Okay, because you will hold most of the burden, not all, but most of the burden that was taken by the duty holder, formerly known as the CDMC. I sound like Prince, don't I? There. The consultant formerly known as. Right. You need to advise all clients of their duties. Okay, so if you're principal designer, you're the first designer to be appointed, then it's your role to advise the client, whether it's domestic or a business client, of their duties. Now, this is my interpretation. Under the new regs as it's been put forward, the client will actually hold the duty to notify the HSE, and the client will hold the duty for, the next one, preparing construction, pre-construction information. But in real terms, what happens in the real world is that it's the construction professional. So it will actually be the principal designer, because the likelihood is you will get a client, they will not know about the industry, you will advise them, they will say, well, can you do it? And you will say yes. So if you're a principal designer, you'll be doing the F10, so you need to know the new notification criteria, and you will be preparing the pre-construction information pack, which is the information that I used to ask any designers in the room for the information to be put into that, to look in the wider context of how your design is going to affect the buildability, the usability and the maintainability of the building that is going to be built. And you hold all your original duties, whether you knew about those or not. Okay, CDMC role. What now for the CDMC? Is the role of the CDMC dead? Not quite. There will be no formal duty called CDMC or CDM coordinator, but there is the possibility that there will be they won't be a duty holder, but they will be a consultant who will be able to advise professional team members, and the likelihood it will be called project supervisor. So we're going to go back to the PS, like the planning supervisor, because I think the RIBA have still got some letterheads with PS at the bottom, so they want to reuse those. But that hasn't been defined yet. It will be a consultant role, and how it will be defined, time will tell, because it will be, you know, it will meet the needs of the industry. So if there are designers out there who are competent designers, and we'll talk about competence in a minute, who want to use an external consultant to advise them how to comply to the new regulations and their current duties under the old regs anyway, then a consultant's role will probably be something that can be taken forward. Again, principal contractors who want to have the advice of a former CDMC for how they can comply during the construction phase, then I'm sure there's a role there for the old CDMCs. And the word on the sort of the forums at the moment is that there's a lot of companies that are actually driving forward the consultant's role already. So it looks like we've kind of accepted that we're going to be taken out as formal duty holder, but then come back in as charge you twice as much to actually have our experience and advice. So that saves money, doesn't it? So back to Lovenstadt, how to reduce costs in construction. Yeah. Right, so what did we do in the CDM regs 2007? So, basic list, advise clients of their duties, that's what we used to do. Notify the HSE under the criteria for the F10 notification. Speak to the designers about what they're designing and prepare in principle the information called pre-construction information to be given to all other designers and contractors for tendering purposes, etc., etc. Notify the HSE, again, additional notification of when the construction site is going to actually start. Review the construction phase plan presented by the contractor, and then advise the client whether it's suitably developed for the work to start on site, whether it's just to start on day one and be developed, or it is all inclusive and all incumbent for the whole of the project, you know, really driven by how big and how complicated the project is. Then we would look at coordinating the information provided by all designers and contractors and supply chain members for the health and safety file. That's what we used to do in a nutshell. Sounds simple, doesn't it? Don't know why you didn't need me in the industry, you could do that yourselves. So that's what you are going to have to do, either as a principal designer or a principal contractor. You are going to be part of that team, and then the clients who hold a lot of the duties for making sure that information is provided will want your assistance and your advice to make sure that they comply to their duties under the law. Right, who does the role? As we just said, it's going to be split between principal designer and principal contractor and the client. Right, principal contractors, the majority of the audience. What do you need to know? Generally, business as usual. You have the least, or you are affected the least with these changes, because in principle you still hold the principal management for the risks on construction site and managing those risks and building that building. Those duties will not be removed. They are yours until the building is complete. You do have some minor changes with regard to whether you are a principal contractor or a contractor with regard to advice to clients, and contractors, if you are first in the door and it's a small domestic project, your duties will change slightly because of the changes to the domestic client aspect. But in general, it's business as usual. Okay. As we said, domestic projects are included. Okay, so that in in a nutshell, is, in brief, the changes to the regs coming in that are proposed for April next year. My view is that it's a backward step, because I think the role of a CDMC, if used correctly, adds value to construction. I think, you know, what we've done, especially on the Isle of Wight, the CDMCs that we have here do a very good job. I think they're well known by the industry. I always describe the role of a CDMC as you're like the unwanted uncle at a wedding. You get the invite, yeah, but nobody actually wants you to turn up. And when you do turn up, no one actually wants to talk to you. Well, sometimes, and a lot of the clients and contractors I've worked with actually do value the work. I know that I feel valued on the projects I've been working on, that we do actually add some value, but when used correctly. I know there's members in the audience have a different view on whether we've added value or not, but that you're entitled to your own opinion, and only time will tell whether the new regs, where the duties are now held by clients and principal designers, as whether our role was actually adding value or not. And if it wasn't, that's fine. I'll deal with that and move on. Okay, in summary. So, clients have new duties. Domestic clients are included under the regs for notification. Principal designers, you take most of the burden. This is meant to be a picture of what designers and architects do in their role. I quite like that one, which is a visualisation specialist. So, Andrew, do you see yourself as a visualisation specialist?
Interesting on that. Possibly. I mean, we have
you are multidisciplined, yes, absolutely. So along with those roles which have been identified as roles as a designer, you are now going to be principally the CDM coordinator. The CDMC duties are going to be split between clients, principal designers and principal contractors, but mainly between clients and principal designers. As we said, the principal contractor, you are affected the least by it currently. Is the role of the CDMC dead? No, not quite. And we will see as time goes on whether there is a consultant's role which adds value and can be a business that people can make money from. Because ultimately, we will only stay in the industry if we can make money. It's as simple as that. A new 20-persons rule, so you can't flood sites with bodies to get it done, has been brought in line with the European directive. And my last finishing comment is be careful what you wish for. So, and answers on a postcard for what that means. But that's how I see designers at the moment. You've already overworked and underpaid, Andrew, aren't you? Yeah. You're now going to be working all night and sleeping all day. Any questions?